Welcome to American History Lesson 27. Post-war prosperity. Our lesson objectives are: identify the economic, social, and political changes to the U.S. post-World War II, identify the changes made in America's workforce, identify key items and possessions that became symbols of status, identify what impact post-World War II prosperity had on America's minorities. Post-World War II America. Millions of returning soldiers used the GI Bill of Rights to get an education and buy a home. To meet the housing shortage, developers such as William Levitt built thousands of homes en masse. The houses looked exactly alike but were affordable. Many families moved to the growing suburbs. The U.S. economy adjusted to peacetime. When the war ended, many defense workers were laid off as wartime production was no longer required. When price controls ended, prices shot up. But responding to years of pent-up demand and using millions of dollars saved during the war, people began to buy cars, appliances, and housing. Soon the economy boomed. Labor strife arose just after the war. A steelworker strike was followed by coal miners and railroad workers. President Truman threatened to draft the workers into the army and ordered them back to work. The unions agreed to return to work. Voters showed a growing conservative outlook. Politics of prosperity. In the fall of 1946, they put conservative Republicans in control of both the Senate and the House. The Republicans opposed Truman's domestic program, including the civil rights bills he proposed for African Americans. Truman used an executive order to desegregate the armed forces, but his commitment to civil rights split the Democratic Party. Winning the party nomination for president in 1948, he insisted on strong support for civil rights. Many Southern Democrats, called Dixiecrats, left the party to form their own party. Polls predicted that Truman would lose the election to Tom Dewey, the Republican candidate. Truman campaigned vigorously against the do-nothing Republican Congress and won victory. Truman could not get all domestic fair deal programs approved by Congress, and by 1952 he had become unpopular. The Republicans nominated war hero Dwight Eisenhower, who won due to his popularity and voter disenchantment with Democrats. He followed conservative policies. While he did not believe that the government should be involved in desegregation, he did use federal troops to back a federal court ruling to desegregate schools. He supported increased funding for housing and the creation of an interstate highway system. Eisenhower was very popular. He won re-election in 1956. The post-war economy was changing, with greater emphasis on service industries such as sales and communications. More and more workers held white-collar jobs in these industries. Critics of the New World of Business, emphasizing loyalty, said that it promoted a sameness of behavior and a loss of individuality. Many Americans enjoyed the benefit of this new economy, though. Post-war America saw a great burst of population called the baby boom, prompted by the reuniting of families, growing prosperity, and medical advances such as the vaccine to prevent polio. Popular culture glorified a woman's role as mother, but many women were dissatisfied with suburban life. By 1960, about 40% of women with children worked outside the home. Leisure time was increasing and was spent on active and spectator sports and reading. A major part of the post-war economic boom was the auto industry, made possible by easy credit and cheap gasoline. Car ownership increased from 40 to 60 million vehicles because it was necessary to own a car in the suburbs. Travel over distances was made easier by the new interstate highway system, which people use for vacation travel. Increased driving did lead to more pollution. The new luxuries for America. By the mid-1950s, nearly 60% of all Americans were in the middle class. Success was shown by buying goods such as clothing made from new synthetic fibers and appliances. People were encouraged by companies that introduced new models, offered easy credit, and flooded the media with tempting ads. The main vehicle of popular culture in the 1950s was television. TV ownership jumped from 9% of all homes in 1950 to 90% in 1960. Stations spread across the country, and many shows became widely popular. Fun fact, the numbers of homes owning a television set increased rapidly in the decade, from 0.4% in 1948 to 83.4% in 1958. No other household technology has spread so rapidly. There were three major broadcasters of television programs in the 1950s, namely ABC, CBS, and NBC. All of them broadcasted shows and programs which targeted the same audience. Critics said that the new medium focused on white suburban America, rarely showing women, African Americans, or Hispanics, and often portraying them only in stereotyped roles. They complained that there was too much violence. As dramas and sitcoms moved to television, radio programming changed to focus on news, music, and local interest. The entertainment industry thrived, as the number of stations rose by 50%. The movie industry suffered from TV's competition, however. To compete against television, Hollywood began releasing spectacular movies that shined on a big screen. While popular culture showed the suburban way of life, other movements presented other points of view. The beat writers were nonconformists, criticizing the materialism of mainstream culture. A new music consisting of a mix of an electrified rhythm and blues called rock and roll spread across the country, attracting many young people. The biggest star was Elvis Presley, with 45 songs that sold more than 1 million copies. African American entertainers got increasing exposure in the media. At the same time, many radio stations played music primarily intended for African American audiences. American minorities in the post-World War II boom. While prosperity reached many, it was not universal. 1 in 4 Americans in 1962 was economically poor, unable to match the spending of the middle class. Another problem was white flight from the cities and increasing migration of African Americans from rural South to cities. As more whites left the city, so did businesses. With fewer jobs available, more city dwellers fell into poverty. Another urban problem was the lack of housing, as millions of new homes had been built in the suburbs, but few in the cities. An urban renewal movement began, but sometimes old decaying housing was torn down for highways and shopping centers, but not replaced with new housing. During World War II, about 200,000 Mexicans came to the United States to work as migrant farm workers. Afterwards, many of them decided to stay. Many other Mexicans came to the United States to find jobs. Because many of these immigrants were illegal, the government launched a program to seize and return illegal immigrants. At the same time, Mexican Americans fought for equal rights. Native Americans struggled for equal rights as well. Their position was made more difficult by the government's new policy of termination, meant to end federal responsibility for Native American affairs. The Bureau of Indian Affairs moved thousands of Native Americans to cities and helped them find places to live and jobs. This policy failed to address discrimination and took away the Native Americans' medical care. The termination policy was dismissed in 1963. What next? Take the time to go back and review the lesson on your own. After your review, complete the lesson review for the lesson and submit for grading. Remember, your submission should follow all the rules for standard written English. All submissions must be written in your own words and sources used cited at the end. How to cite sources in APA format. When you reference a source within an APA-style paper, whether it is using a direct quote, repurposing an image, or simply referring to an idea or theory, you should insert an in-text citation, the author's surname, and the date of publication within parentheses, straight after a direct quote. CitationMachine.net will assist you in creating citations.